We've tried 4 different loads so far in this rifle during the preliminary load development process, and we learned a lot about this rifle during that process. Now we've got 2 more loads to try to see if this rifle is going to teach us anything else before we go into the final load development. So far, the preliminary load development for this 1885 Winchester here in 6.5 Creedmoor has went very well. And now we've just got a couple more things to try before we wrap this up. And one of the things I wanted to try a new powder, Varget, with 140 grain Sierra Match King bullets. And I also want to run some 130 grain bullets through here. So we've got some Hornady ELD Max bullets loaded up for this rifle that we're going to try now. And we're trying this with the IMR 4350. That seems to have been the most stable powder so far through this rifle. So it seemed like a good powder to start with on these 130 grainers. Okay. And something interesting happened though when I was loading up these Hornady bullets. Apparently they're ever so slightly larger in diameter than the Sierra Match King bullets. And if you remember when we first checked the distance to the lands with the Sierra Match Kings, I said there was a tight spot in the throat here that I was having to put extra pressure on it to get the bullet through that tight spot to actually touch the lands. Well, it got even tighter with these. Okay, so when that happened, the light bulb went off for me, and I finally figured out what's going on with this throat, or at least I think I have. Initially, when we first went over the rifle, went through here at the bore scope, I could see parts of the lands still visible in the throat. I was not happy about that, but I think I know what happened there. The reamer was dull. It was undersized on the very end where it cuts the throat, and because it was undersized, it didn't clean up all the way. That's why we were still seeing part of those lands. That's why the bullets are so tight whenever I check the distance to the lands when I put the actual bullet in there. Okay, so that made sense then on why we were seeing that. Now, that doesn't seem to have been affecting our accuracy any. I was slightly concerned about maybe that's causing some pressure spikes or something when the cartridge first goes off, but we hadn't seen any pressure signs, so apparently it's not an issue. I'm still not particularly crazy about that, but anyway. All right, let's get to shooting and see what we get from these 130 grainers. Not a bad start. That might be showing some potential. Okay, that was not a bad start at all with the 130 grain ELDs. Now, unfortunately, I did forget to write down my velocities for the first 2 shots. I got a little distracted. I do that when it gets close to the bullseye on the first shot with the new load. Okay, and as far as chronograph, I had a few questions on it. I've got the Caldwell just basic chronograph, and it works fine. The only issue with it, this one does not have Bluetooth, so to connect it to your phone to record everything there so you don't have to forget about writing stuff down, it's got a cable. But for whatever reason, it will not sync with my phone, my phone being an Android. Now, Joey, he's used the same chronograph, this exact same one, and it works fine with his iPhone. But that's just a known issue with the Caldwells, them just not working very well sometimes with Android apps. Other than that, though, it does work really well. All right, let's keep going and see what else we've got. Okay, that got my attention. Okay, that obviously showed a lot of potential with the 130 grain ELDMs. The only thing that really bothered me there was the variations in velocities. And this last group, I didn't write down the very first shot velocity on it, but I'm guessing it was lower velocity. The impact was lower, and I noticed on that third group, we had that one high shot where the velocity on it was the second shot, and the velocity on it was 2,825 feet per second. So 35 feet per second faster than the previous two that hit lower. Now, that wouldn't be an issue if I had the timing right on the harmonics on the barrel. Okay, and we'll talk about that later, but you can actually get the timing down to the point that we all know that a rifle vibrates when you shoot it, so that's your harmonic wave. You can actually get it timed to the point that your slower shots, the barrel's actually higher than with your faster ones, and it'll cause you to have the same point of impact at distance. And that's nothing new about any of this stuff. World War I, World War II, the British with the Lee Enfield 303 British, they had two types of ammo. So I think they had the 150 grain was the standard issue ammo, but then they had 175 grain ammunition for the machine guns. But they wanted to be able to shoot either ammunition in their rifles, so what they did is they set up the rifles so that the slower bullet would actually leave the muzzle when the muzzle was higher in the air during the harmonic wave. And what you ended up with was the same point of impact at 200 yards with the 175 grain and the 150 grain bullets. That way they were interchangeable at that distance. Okay, well, that's not what we have going on here. Apparently, this is just off in the cycle and the bullet's leaving the muzzle while the muzzle's higher in the air with the faster velocity, just therefore magnifying the error that we're seeing from the faster shot. It's hitting even higher. Okay, but it definitely showed some potential there. Okay, let's try the 140 grain Sierra Match Kings with Barget. I'm really curious to see what we get from that one. We had really good results with the IMR 4350 with these 140 grain Sierra Match Kings. Then we tried a couple other powders. I tried the H4831 and then the H4350. Well, both of those have slightly faster burn rates, or excuse me, slightly slower burn rates than the IMR. Well, I noticed the velocities weren't nearly as stable with those as what we saw with the IMR 4350. Right, so today we're trying Barget. It's got a slightly faster burn rate than the IMR 4350. And I'm just curious, does this maintain the stable velocities and do we still get really good, if not better, accuracy from it? That's the only way to find out is to try it. So let's get to shooting. Okay, that showed some potential as well. We're not seeing the super tight groups with the 140 grains like we did with that second group with the 130 grains. But what we are seeing is just very consistent velocities. And that's really encouraging, and it's really going to be interesting to see what these last two 4-shot groups, as the velocity picks up, are they going to remain stable on the velocities, and are our groups possibly going to tighten up? And I noticed with the other powder charges we tried with the 140 grain bullets up till now, as we got up in our charge on the velocities, our groups opened up and the velocities became less stable. Let's see what these last two are going to do. And our velocities did open up, and our group did open up. Okay, that was a pretty significant change in velocities from that second shot to that last shot, 2,739 feet per second to 2,706, and we can also see that drop in velocity. Now, just myself, I'm wondering, just thinking out loud, with that throat being tight, as the barrel heats up and expands, it's going to be less tight. Is that having any effect? I don't know. That's all part of getting to know the rifle. Okay, I'm going to pack it in. We'll meet up at the shop in just a minute. We'll look at the results. We'll figure out where we're going next. Okay, that was interesting. And what was especially interesting was all of the vertical variation we had in our groups. Okay, the 130 grain ELDMs showed great potential. We had our first group, a nice little 3-shot group with 2 of the shots pretty much in the same hole, 680 thousandths. Then a really nice little clover leaf here with 3 shots, 325 thousandths. All right, then our groups opened up, and all of our variation was vertical. There's almost zero horizontal variation on this next group, the third one. And then the fourth group, very little horizontal variation on it, almost all horizontal. Then when we look at the 140 grain with the Varget, okay, the velocities were consistent. But our groups, all of our variation was vertical, again, with very little movement horizontal. And about the only thing I can say for certain is I wasn't pulling many shots with so little horizontal variation, but I have no idea what's causing all the vertical variation. It's not stringing, okay? If the shots were consistently walking and getting higher and higher and higher and higher, all right, we'd say, okay, the barrel's touching the forend. As the barrel heats up and expands, that's putting pressure on it, and the shots are going higher. But that's not what we saw. We saw random high, low, high, low, high, low. I have no clue what's causing it. All right, this is one of those situations where I wish I knew more than I do. So where do we go from here, though? I guess that's the question. Okay, I think we're done with the preliminary load development. We know this gun has a propensity to just, when the groups open up, they're vertical. All right, going back to when we broke in the bore on this rifle, we fired a shot, cleaned the barrel, fired 2 shots. Our variation vertical with no variation horizontally whatsoever on those 2 shots. I mean, that just seems to be what this rifle does. But with the lower pressure charges, we do see some pretty decent groups out of it. It just seems like it's when we get into those higher pressures that we start getting all that. All right, so I think what we're going to do, we're going to go on and move on to the final load development. And again, our goal is to shoot a 2.5-inch 5-shot group at 500 yards. Okay, we've seen some loads here that are capable of that, as for accuracy wise. We've got one right here, 325 thousandths, 3 shots. That's, I mean, that's well under half a MOA. Now, 3-shot group, that just really doesn't tell us anything. Okay, so we need to see how much of this is going to repeat, how consistent things are going to be. Plus, we also have some fire formed brass now to work with, which should tighten our groups up even more. Okay, and all of this was at 100 yards. Okay, well, we need to start shooting at distance now to see what we're going to get at 300, at 500, and start working our way out. So I think what we're going to do next, I'm going to load up 2 ladder tests. One where we started with the IMR 4350 and 140 grain Game Kings. And then I'm going to load up a second with the 130 grain ELD with the IMR 4350 and try to repeat this, what we saw here. And we're going to do this at distance, at 300 yards. Okay, that should give us some more information. And that's all we're doing here, is we're just collecting information. And as far as the preliminary, I think the last few trips have really shown the value of doing a preliminary load development and thinking of it as a preliminary. Thinking of it as we're just getting to know the rifle, we're just trying some powders and bullets, we're just seeing what we can learn. Okay, we learned some stuff. Now we're going to see if we can take what we learned and apply that to a final load development and come up with something that shoots good. All right, God bless, and we'll get to the range next time and see what happens.